Stop waiting to feel motivated. Motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes, and when it dies, most people stop. This audiobook exists for one reason: to teach you how to keep moving when the feeling disappears. You will learn how disciplined people make progress in silence, without hype, without emotion, and without needing to believe in themselves every day. This is not about intensity. This is about systems. Quiet systems. Relentless systems. Systems that execute whether you feel ready or not. If you can follow structure instead of emotion, consistency becomes inevitable. Chapter 1. Motivation is a trap, not a tool. Motivation feels powerful. It feels like the engine. It feels like the reason you start. And that's exactly why it's dangerous. Most people build their entire lives around a feeling that cannot be controlled. They wait to feel ready. They wait to feel inspired. They wait for the emotional surge that convinces them today is the day. And when that feeling disappears, because it always does, they collapse. That's the trap. Motivation is not a strategy. It's a chemical reaction. It's unreliable. It spikes. It fades. It leaves without warning. And if your progress depends on it, your progress will die with it. You have a choice. You can keep chasing emotion, or you can build something that works without it. That's the key. Disciplined people do not rely on motivation. They expect it to disappear. They plan for its absence. They assume boredom. They assume resistance. They assume days where nothing feels rewarding. And they move anyway. Motivation fades. Structure remains. Look at real-world professionals. Not influencers. Not speakers. Professionals. Athletes train in the off-season when there's no crowd, no applause, no adrenaline. They don't ask themselves how they feel. The schedule tells them what to do. The system tells them where to show up. The plan decides for them. That's not passion. That's structure. Surgeons don't cancel procedures because they're uninspired. Pilots don't skip flights because they're tired of flying. Workers don't get paid for excitement. They get paid for showing up. And yet somehow, when it comes to your personal goals, you treat execution like it requires emotional permission. You don't need their permission. You don't even need your own permission. You need a system. The truth most people don't want to accept is this: motivation is strongest at the beginning and weakest where it matters most. At the start, everything feels possible. In the middle, the novelty is gone. At the end, the work gets heavy. Motivation cannot survive that environment. That's why people quit halfway. That's why progress stalls. That's why consistency feels impossible. It's not because you lack discipline. It's because you built your discipline on emotion. It's not about how badly you want it. It's about how well you're structured. Say that again. It's not about desire. It's about design. You have a choice. You can continue asking, "Do I feel like it today?" Or you can decide that the question no longer matters. Disciplined people remove the question entirely. They don't wake up negotiating with themselves. There's no internal debate. There's no drama. The action is scheduled. The decision was made earlier. Execution is automatic. That's the shift. Motivation says, let's go when it feels right. Structure says, we go because it's time. And structure wins every time. Think about brushing your teeth. You don't need motivation. You don't scroll for inspiration. You don't wait for alignment. You do it because it's a rule. Because it's part of the system that keeps you functional. That's how disciplined actions work when they're designed correctly. You didn't fail because you're lazy. You failed because your system depends on motivation. And motivation is a trap. Motivation fades. Structure remains. Here's where people get confused. They think discipline is about willpower. It's not. Willpower burns fast. Willpower is emotional. Willpower gets exhausted. Structure doesn't get tired. Structure doesn't argue. Structure doesn't care how you feel. That's the advantage. When you rely on motivation, every bad day becomes a crisis. When you rely on structure, bad days are irrelevant. That's the key. You don't rise to the level of how inspired you feel. You fall to the level of the systems you built. And if those systems are weak, feelings will expose them fast. Most people say, I lost motivation. What they really mean is, I never had a structure. That's a hard truth, but it's a useful one. Because once you understand this, the problem shifts. You stop asking how to feel better. You start asking how to build better rules. Rules beat feelings. Schedules beat moods. Systems beat motivation. You don't need to feel confident to act confident. You don't need to feel disciplined to act disciplined. You act first. The identity follows. That's how professionals are formed. You have a choice. You can treat your goals like entertainment, driven by excitement, or you can treat them like responsibility, driven by structure. Only one works long-term. Motivation fades. Structure remains. If you remember nothing else from this chapter, remember this. When motivation dies, that's not the end. That's the beginning of real discipline. That's where most people stop and where you keep going. Because now you're no longer dependent on how you feel. You're dependent on what you decided. And that changes everything. But structure doesn't begin with doing more. It begins with deciding once instead of deciding every day. Because every repeated decision drains energy. Every negotiation weakens consistency. You master the truth about motivation. Now it's time to eliminate daily negotiation. Chapter 2. Decide once, not every day. Every day you delay action, you think you're tired. You're not tired. You're negotiating. And negotiation is expensive. Decision fatigue destroys consistency because most people try to redecide their life every single day. They wake up and ask the same questions again. Should I train today? Should I work on this? Should I stick to the plan? And by the time they reach a decision, their energy is gone. That's not discipline. That's self-sabotage disguised as flexibility. You have a choice. You can keep renegotiating your commitments, or you can remove the negotiation entirely. That's the key. High performers don't decide more often than you. They decide less. They decide once, clearly, and then they stop thinking about it. The less you decide, the more you execute. Every unmade decision drains energy. Every repeated decision weakens resolve. Every internal debate gives emotion another chance to interfere. You already decided. Execute the decision. Look at how your life already works in areas where you're consistent. You don't debate whether to go to work each morning. You don't reconsider whether to follow traffic laws. You don't renegotiate whether to pay your bills. The rule exists. The decision is finished. That's why those actions get done. Consistency doesn't come from wanting it more. It comes from removing choice. Most people think freedom means having options. In reality, discipline comes from constraints. The fewer options you allow yourself, the stronger your follow-through becomes. You don't need motivation. You don't need confidence. You need fewer decisions. That's the shift. Decision fatigue is the silent killer of progress. It's not dramatic. It doesn't feel dangerous. It just slowly drains you until doing nothing feels easier than choosing again. And once nothing becomes the default, weeks disappear, then months, then years. You have a choice. You can allow your brain to renegotiate your future daily, or you can lock decisions into rules. Rules remove emotion. Rules remove doubt. Rules remove delay. You already decided. Execute the decision. Here's what disciplined people do differently. They pre-decide time, place, and action. Same time, same place, same action. No variation, no drama. If it's 6 a.m., you train. If it's 8 p.m., you study. If it's Monday, you review. There's nothing to think about because thinking is the enemy of follow-through. Most people fail not because the task is hard, but because the decision feels heavy. When you pre-decide, the task becomes mechanical. You show up the same way every time. That's not rigid. That's efficient. Look at professional environments. Systems run on schedules, not feelings. Factories don't ask if they're motivated. Offices don't wait for inspiration. They operate on predefined rules. And that's why they function. But when it comes to personal growth, people abandon structure and expect consistency. That contradiction is why nothing sticks. It's not about discipline. It's about design. You already decided. Execute the decision. Every time you say, "I'll see how I feel," you're giving up control. You're allowing mood to overrule logic. You're handing the steering wheel to the least reliable part of yourself. Feelings are temporary. Rules are permanent. That's the key. Pre-decided rules don't make life dull. They make progress inevitable. They free your mental bandwidth for what matters instead of wasting it on repeated choices. You don't need to wake up strong. You just need to wake up committed. Commitment comes from final decisions. Here's a simple test. If you skip an action and feel relieved instead of disappointed, the rule was never final. It was optional, and optional actions disappear under pressure. Discipline begins when options end. You have a choice. You can keep allowing exceptions, or you can make rules that don't care about excuses. And don't misunderstand this. This isn't about being harsh with yourself. It's about being honest. Every exception teaches your brain that the rule is negotiable. And once negotiation starts, consistency dies. You already decided. Execute the decision. This is why habits fail when they're built on intention instead of structure. Intention sounds good. Structure works. Intention says, "I'll try." Structure says, "This happens." Professionals live inside this happens. And when you adopt that mindset, execution stops feeling heroic. It becomes normal. That's the goal. You're not here to feel productive. You're here to be productive. You don't need to prove discipline. You need to practice it. Every time you follow through without debate, you reinforce identity. Every time you skip after negotiating, you weaken trust in yourself. Trust is built through consistency. Consistency is built through rules. Rules are built through decisions made once. That's the chain. Motivation fades. Structure remains. And deciding once is how structure begins. But there's a final layer to this. Even the best decisions fail if the system relies on high energy. If your rules demand perfection, you'll eventually break them, which means the next step is critical. You've learned how to eliminate negotiation. Now you must learn how to build systems that work without effort. Chapter 3. Build systems that run without you. Most people set goals. Disciplined people build systems. That difference decides who lasts and who quits. Goals depend on emotion. Systems remove it. Goals ask for effort. Systems create momentum. Goals live in your head. Systems live in your environment. That's why systems win. You have a choice. You can keep chasing goals and hoping motivation shows up. Or you can build systems that execute without asking how you feel. That's the key. A goal says, "I want to get fit." A system says, "I train at the same time, in the same place, no matter what." A goal says, "I want to save money." A system says, "The money is automatically moved before I can touch it." Notice the difference. One requires emotion. The other requires nothing. Systems move when you don't feel like it. Look at the systems already running your life. Automatic bill payments don't ask if you're motivated. Calendars don't wait for inspiration. Alarms don't care how tired you are. They execute because they were designed to. That's power. Most people fail because they make themselves the engine. They rely on self-control, willpower, and motivation to push every action forward. And when that engine breaks down, everything stops. Disciplined people remove themselves from the process. They let structure carry the load. You don't need to be strong every day. You need to be smart once. That's the shift. Goals feel exciting because they promise a future result. Systems feel boring because they focus on today's behavior. But results don't come from excitement. They come from repetition. It's not about what you want. It's about what runs automatically. That's the truth most people avoid. You have a choice. You can keep setting goals that rely on discipline you haven't built yet, or you can design systems that make discipline unnecessary. Systems move when you don't feel like it. Think about routines, morning routines, workflows, checklists. These aren't motivational tools. They're mechanical. They tell you what to do next without asking your opinion. That's why they work. In professional environments, no one says, "I feel inspired to follow the process today." Processes exist so performance doesn't drop when people are tired, stressed, or distracted. And yet, in personal development, people try to operate without systems and wonder why consistency collapses. It's not because you lack commitment. It's because your setup is weak. It's not about discipline. It's about design. If your system requires emotional energy to start, it's not a system. It's a wish. Systems begin with triggers. When X happens, Y follows. No debate. No delay. When your alarm goes off, you get up. When you sit at your desk, you work. When the calendar says training, you train. Simple, predictable, relentless. That predictability is what removes emotion. Systems move when you don't feel like it. Most people overcomplicate this. They want complex plans, perfect routines, optimized schedules. That's another trap. Complexity creates friction. Friction invites resistance. Good systems are boring. Good systems are simple. Good systems are repeatable on bad days. You have a choice. You can build systems that only work when life is easy. Or you can build systems that survive stress, fatigue, and boredom. Only one leads to long-term progress. Automatic savings work because you never see the money. Workout appointments work because they're scheduled. Checklists work because they prevent thinking. Remove thinking and execution increases. That's not laziness. That's intelligence. You don't rise to the level of your ambition. You fall to the level of your systems. And if your systems are weak, emotion will expose them instantly. Systems move when you don't feel like it. Here's a hard truth. If you need to hype yourself up, your system is broken. If you need reminders, encouragement, and emotional reinforcement, your design is flawed. A system should function even when you're tired, distracted, or uninterested. That's the standard. This is why goals often create frustration. You hit them or miss them, and then what? Systems never end. They compound quietly over time. That quiet accumulation is what builds results. No big moments, no dramatic breakthroughs, just steady, unremarkable execution. That's how real change happens. And this brings us to a critical mistake many people make. They build systems that are too demanding. They assume high energy forever. And when energy drops, the system collapses, which means the next lesson is essential. You've learned to replace goals with systems. Now you must learn how to design systems that work on your worst days. Chapter 4. Lower the bar so you never quit. Most people quit because their standards are unrealistic. Not because they are weak, not because they don't care, but because their plan only works on high-energy days. And high-energy days are rare. You have a choice. You can keep building standards that demand enthusiasm, focus, and perfect conditions. Or you can design standards that work when you're tired, distracted, and mentally done. That's the key. Disciplined people do not aim high every day. They aim low enough to be repeatable. They understand something most people resist. Consistency is not built on your best days. It is built on your worst ones. Motivation fades. Energy fluctuates. Life interferes. So if your system requires intensity, it will eventually break. Small enough to start, strong enough to matter. Most people confuse discipline with pushing hard. In reality, discipline is about staying in the game. You don't win by impressive bursts. You win by avoiding collapse. quitting isn't dramatic. It usually starts with missing one day, then another. Then the standard feels too heavy to return to. So people don't. That's not failure. That's poor design. You have a choice. You can keep setting standards that look good on paper, or you can set standards that survive reality. Disciplined people choose survivability. This is where the idea of the minimum non-negotiable action comes in. Not your ideal action, not your maximum effort, your minimum, the smallest version of the behavior that still counts. Not because it's impressive, but because it keeps the chain unbroken. If you train, the minimum might be 5 minutes. If you write, it might be 1 paragraph. If you study, it might be opening the material. Small enough to start, strong enough to matter. The point is not performance. The point is identity continuity. Every time you perform the minimum, you reinforce something critical. I am the kind of person who shows up. That identity matters more than intensity. Most people think lowering the bar is laziness. That's ego talking. They want to feel heroic. They want the session to feel meaningful. But discipline does not care about feelings. Discipline cares about repetition. You don't need to feel proud. You need to stay consistent. That's the shift. You have a choice. You can chase days that feel productive, or you can protect the habit on days that don't. Real discipline is humble. It's quiet. It doesn't announce itself. It does what is required and moves on. Small enough to start, strong enough to matter. Look at professionals again. Athletes don't skip training because they're tired. They adjust intensity. Businesses don't shut down because sales dip. They scale operations. They protect continuity because continuity compounds. When you miss days, restarting becomes expensive. When you lower the bar, restarting becomes unnecessary. That's the advantage. Here's a truth you need to hear. Doing less is often how you do more long-term. Because the worst mistake isn't moving slowly. It's stopping completely. You already decided to be consistent. This is how you honor that decision on low-energy days. You remove drama. You remove expectations. You do the minimum. And the minimum keeps the system alive. Small enough to start. Strong enough to matter. Most people don't quit because the work is hard. They quit because the standard feels heavy when life piles on. By lowering the bar, you remove that pressure. No heroics. No guilt. No recovery phase. Just execution. You have a choice. You could demand intensity and burnout. Or you can demand continuity and build momentum. Momentum doesn't require effort. It requires consistency. And consistency comes from standards that work every day, not just good ones. This is how disciplined people think. They design for fatigue. They plan for resistance. They assume low motivation. That's not pessimism. That's realism. And realism is powerful. If your system breaks when you're tired, it's not a system. If your habit disappears under stress, it was never stable. The minimum non-negotiable action creates stability. You never ask, should I do something today? You already decided. You execute the minimum. And most days, once you start, you do more. But that's not the goal. The goal is starting. Small enough to start. Strong enough to matter. This is how discipline stops feeling heavy. This is how progress becomes boring and unstoppable. You are not behind because you're slow. You're behind because you stop. Lower the bar. Protect the habit. Stay in motion. Because consistency isn't built on force. It's built on forgiveness and structure. And now that you've learned how to keep moving even on bad days, there's one more mistake that destroys discipline if left unchecked. People let their feelings decide their actions. That ends now. You've learned how to design standards that survive low energy. Next, you must learn how to remove emotion from execution entirely. Chapter 5. Separate feelings from actions. Most people believe their feelings are commands. They wake up tired and assume they should rest. They feel bored and assume they should stop. They feel uncertain and assume they should wait. That belief is the reason discipline collapses. Feelings are not instructions. They are information. And information is optional. Action is not. Feelings are noise. Action is law. You have a choice. You can let your internal state dictate your behavior, or you can decide that behavior happens regardless of mood. That's the key. Disciplined people do not feel better before they act. They act first. They understand something crucial. Feelings change after movement, not before. Waiting to feel ready is a mistake. Waiting to feel confident is a mistake. Waiting to feel motivated is a mistake. Because feelings are reactive. They follow action. Look at the simplest examples in your life. You brush your teeth even when you're tired. You show up to work even when you don't feel like it. You pay bills even when you're stressed. Why? Because those actions are unconditional. You don't ask how you feel. You do what's required. That's discipline. And the mistake most people make is treating personal growth as optional while treating responsibilities as mandatory. That mindset guarantees inconsistency. You have a choice. You can continue letting feelings vote on your future, or you can remove feelings from the decision entirely. Feelings are noise. Action is law. Think about how often emotion lies to you. It exaggerates discomfort. It predicts failure. It convinces you that skipping today won't matter. An emotion is convincing because it feels real. But feelings are temporary data points, not objective truth. If you acted only when you felt like it, your life would collapse quickly. You already know this. You've proven it in the areas where rules exist. So the problem isn't action itself. The problem is conditional action. Conditional action waits. Unconditional action executes. That's the difference. Disciplined people separate how they feel from what they do. They don't suppress emotion. They just don't obey it. They acknowledge it and move anyway. I feel tired. I'm acting anyway. I feel bored. I'm acting anyway. I feel unmotivated. I'm acting anyway. That internal dialogue is powerful. You're not fighting emotion. You're ignoring it. Feelings are noise. Action is law. Most people overestimate the importance of mood. They think productivity requires the right emotional state. It doesn't. It requires obedience to structure. Professionals don't perform based on mood. They perform based on role. And when you treat your commitments as a role, not a feeling, they get done. Your feelings are allowed to exist. They're not allowed to decide. That's the boundary. You have a choice. You can keep asking, do I feel like it? Or you can start asking, what is required? One question leads to delay. The other leads to progress. And once you adopt this mindset, something interesting happens. The resistance weakens. The drama fades. Action becomes neutral. That neutrality is freedom. You stop turning every task into a psychological event. You stop making progress a reflection of your emotional health. You simply act, and action creates clarity. Most people try to think their way into discipline. That never works. Discipline is physical. It's behavioral. It's built through motion, not contemplation. Feelings are noise. Action is law. When you act consistently despite emotion, you retrain your brain. You teach it that discomfort is not a stopping signal. You build tolerance. You build self-trust. Trust comes from evidence. Evidence comes from action, not from intention, not from mood. If you want to feel more disciplined, stop chasing the feeling and start practicing the behavior. That's the shift. You don't need to feel confident to act confident. You don't need to feel disciplined to act disciplined. You act first. The feeling follows. You have a choice. You can remain emotionally dependent, or you can become behaviorally sovereign. One puts you at the mercy of your inner state. The other gives you control. This is why small, unconditional actions matter so much. They reinforce the identity of someone who acts regardless of mood. That identity compounds. And once identity shifts, effort decreases. Most people think discipline is hard because they try to negotiate with emotion every day. They try to win the feeling. That's exhausting. You don't need to win it. You need to bypass it. Treat feelings like weather. Notice them. Don't plan your life around them. Rain doesn't stop you from brushing your teeth. Mood shouldn't stop you from executing your system. Feelings are noise. Action is law. This chapter is about freedom. Emotional freedom. Freedom from waiting. Freedom from internal chaos. When action becomes unconditional, consistency becomes normal. And now, there's one final refinement. Even when feelings are removed, many people still struggle because they chase novelty. They think variation keeps them going. It doesn't. The next level of discipline is learning how to make consistency boring and permanent. You've learned how to act regardless of mood. Now you must learn how to make action automatic. Chapter 6. Make consistency boring and automatic. Most people quit because they get bored. Not because the work is too hard. Not because they lack ability. But because the excitement wears off. And they mistake boredom for failure. That mistake costs them everything. You have a choice. You can keep chasing novelty to stay engaged, or you can remove novelty entirely and build something that lasts. That's the key. The most consistent people in the world are not constantly inspired. They're not emotionally charged. They're not excited. They are predictable. Their routines are repetitive. Their schedules are stable. Their actions are unremarkable. And that's why they win. Boring executed daily beats, exciting done rarely. Motivation culture teaches the opposite. It tells you to stay fired up, to seek intensity, to chase breakthroughs, to make everything feel meaningful and powerful. That culture creates starters, not finishers, because intensity is fragile. Novelty expires, and when excitement disappears, most people stop because they don't know how to operate without it. Disciplined people expect boredom. They design for it. They embrace it, because boredom is not an enemy. It's a signal that something is becoming automatic. That's progress. You have a choice. You can assume boredom means something is wrong, or you can understand that boredom means the system is working. That's the shift. Think about any stable part of your life. You don't feel excited about brushing your teeth. You don't feel inspired to commute. You don't feel passion for paying bills. And yet, those things get done. Why? Because they are boring. Because they are routine. Because they require no emotional engagement. That's what consistency looks like. Boring executed daily beats, exciting done rarely. The reason flashy motivation content fails is simple. It trains you to expect emotion before action. When emotion disappears, so does execution. But real discipline removes emotion entirely. No hype, no countdown, no dramatic self-talk. Just action. Quiet. Mechanical. Repeatable. That's how habits lock in. Most people want discipline to feel rewarding in the moment. But discipline is rewarded later. Expecting immediate emotional payoff is another trap. You don't need to feel good during the work. You need the work to get done. You have a choice. You can design routines that entertain you, or you can design routines that sustain you. Only one compounds. This is why variation destroys consistency. People constantly tweak routines, change plans, chase better methods. They think novelty prevents boredom. In reality, it resets habit formation. Every change adds friction. Every variation demands attention. Attention invites emotion, and emotion reintroduces inconsistency. Disciplined people standardize everything they can. Same time, same place, same action. Every day. It's not exciting. It's effective. Boring executed daily beats, exciting done rarely. Look at high-performing environments again. Assembly lines don't change daily to keep workers engaged. Procedures don't evolve based on mood. Systems are stable because stability produces output. Your personal life is no different. If you want consistent results, your process must become dull. Dull is reliable. Dull is calm. Dull doesn't break under stress. That's the advantage. You have a choice. You can chase inspiration and accept volatility, or you can choose boredom and gain control. Most people choose volatility without realizing it. They change workouts, plans, schedules, tools, always searching for something that feels right. And that search never ends, because feeling right is not the requirement. Execution is. This is also why consistency improves mental health. When actions are boring and automatic, there's less internal conflict, less self-talk, less emotional friction. You stop overthinking. You stop evaluating. You stop dramatizing. You just do. Boring, executed daily beats exciting done rarely. The goal is not to make discipline fun. The goal is to make discipline normal. Normal doesn't require effort. Normal doesn't demand motivation. Normal just happens. When discipline becomes normal, it stops feeling like discipline at all. It becomes identity. You're no longer someone trying to be consistent. You're someone who simply follows a routine. That identity is powerful. Most people think they need variety to stay alive. In reality, variety distracts them from finishing anything. Consistency thrives on repetition. Repetition builds efficiency. Efficiency reduces effort. Reduced effort increases adherence. That's the loop. You have a choice. You can keep consuming content to feel motivated, or you can design a life where motivation is irrelevant. The second path is quieter and infinitely stronger. Flashy motivation looks impressive on the surface. Quiet repetition builds real results under it. No applause, no highlight reel, just steady accumulation. Boring executed daily beats, exciting done rarely. If you feel bored right now, good. That means you're finally doing something long enough for your brain to stop resisting it. That's where mastery begins, not in excitement, in repetition. And this prepares you for the next level. Because once consistency is boring and automatic, something changes. You stop measuring how you feel and start measuring what you do. And that shift matters, because progress doesn't come from emotional check-ins. It comes from evidence. You've learned how to remove novelty. You've learned how to make discipline automatic. Now you must learn how to track the only thing that matters. Action. Chapter 7. Track what you do, not how you feel. Most people fail because they rely on feelings to measure progress. They think, I feel productive, so I must be productive. They think, I feel motivated, so I must be disciplined. And when the feeling fades, they stop. That's the trap. Feelings are unreliable. They fluctuate daily. They lie. They exaggerate. They tell you you're winning when you're not, and they tell you you're failing when you are. Evidence does not lie. Evidence builds discipline. You have a choice. You can continue judging yourself by how you feel, or you can measure what actually happens. That's the key. High performers don't wait for internal validation. They record action. They track behavior. They create visible proof of progress. Because proof is undeniable. Proof is objective. Proof tells the brain, you are consistent. You are capable. You're someone who follows through. Evidence builds discipline. Consider checklists. A simple to-do list done daily creates a small but powerful chain of accountability. Each checkmark reinforces identity. Each completed task proves you are not waiting for emotion to act. You are showing up reliably. Evidence builds discipline. Streaks work the same way. You may not feel motivated today. You may feel exhausted, bored, or distracted, but you see the streak, and streaks demand continuity. They remind you that consistency is stronger than feelings. Evidence builds discipline. Professionals track results, not moods. Athletes track reps, distances, and times. Writers track pages and words. Business owners track actions and outputs. They do not ask, do I feel like it today? They ask, did I do what I said I would do? Evidence builds discipline. You have a choice. You can let emotions dictate your sense of accomplishment, or you can let reality dictate it. Reality does not negotiate. Reality does not care about excuses, and neither should you. Tracking what you do creates compounding confidence. Every day you record action, you reinforce identity. You prove to yourself, I am someone who follows through. That proof builds momentum, and momentum makes future action easier. Evidence builds discipline. Look at your daily routine. Which habits are automatic? You probably don't evaluate how motivated you are to brush your teeth or shower. You simply do it. Your brain tracks execution, not emotional approval. That's why small habits stick. That's why systems win. Evidence builds discipline. Most people ignore this principle. They assume self-evaluation is introspective. They believe thinking about how they feel is productive. In reality, this behavior slows progress. Feeling productive is not the same as being productive. Feeling disciplined is not the same as being disciplined. Evidence builds discipline. Your focus should be on what is measurable and observable. The action itself, the streak maintained, the checkmark made, the task completed. Nothing more. Evidence builds discipline. Simple tools work best. A paper notebook, a habit tracking app, a calendar, a checklist. Each completed action is proof. Each day of consistency reinforces identity. Each streak broken teaches a lesson, but also highlights opportunity for repair. Evidence builds discipline. You have a choice. You can rely on fleeting feelings, or you can rely on undeniable proof. One leads to chaos. The other leads to mastery. Tracking also prevents overreaction. You may feel like progress is slow. You may feel like nothing is happening, but the evidence shows otherwise. Action accumulates silently. Momentum grows quietly. When emotion misleads, proof keeps you grounded. Evidence builds discipline. Behavioral tracking is not a crutch. It is a weapon. It is the mechanism that transforms intention into identity. It removes uncertainty. It removes doubt. It removes the excuse of I don't feel like it. Evidence builds discipline, and it compounds. Each checkmark becomes a mental deposit in your bank of trust. Each streak maintained tells your brain, I can rely on myself. That reliability becomes internal gravity. It pulls you toward future action automatically. Evidence builds discipline. Here's a practical application. Write down the one action that is non-negotiable today. Track it. Complete it. Check it off. Repeat tomorrow. Don't overthink. Don't overanalyze. Don't evaluate your mood. Record action. That is the path. Evidence builds discipline. You've already learned how to act regardless of feelings. You've learned how to make action boring and automatic. Now you learn how to validate yourself with proof. Feelings are temporary. Evidence is permanent. Check marks, streaks, completed tasks. They create a chain you cannot break. Evidence builds discipline. And this brings us to the next step. Even with proof, most people fail because they mismanage energy. They rely on bursts of willpower instead of designing life to sustain action. Tracking keeps you honest. Energy management keeps you consistent. You mastered accountability. Now, let's protect your energy. Chapter 8. Protect your energy, not your mood. Most people think productivity comes from feeling good. They wake up hoping for inspiration. They chase emotional highs. They wait for motivation. And when feelings fail, progress dies. That's the trap. It's not mood that drives action. It's energy. Designed for energy, not inspiration. You have a choice. You can chase fleeting feelings, or you can protect the resource that actually matters, your energy. That's the key. Energy is finite. It is the fuel behind every action. You cannot manufacture it with willpower alone. You cannot summon it on demand. You must protect it, optimize it, and respect it. Sleep first. Without it, all systems fail. Discipline collapses. Decisions weaken. Temptations grow stronger. High performance is impossible without recovery. Designed for energy, not inspiration. Next, environment. Most people work in friction-filled spaces. Cluttered desks. Distracting phones. Interruptions everywhere. Every obstacle drains energy. Every distraction reduces execution. Remove friction. Simplify your space. Make the action obvious. Make the first step easy. The less energy spent resisting the environment, the more energy remains for what matters. Designed for energy, not inspiration. Boundaries are critical. People spend energy saying yes to everything. They let others dictate their time, their focus, their attention. Every unnecessary yes is a withdrawal from the energy bank. Protect it. Say no. Set limits. Control your inputs. Designed for energy, not inspiration. Even habits can be redesigned for energy efficiency. Meal prep reduces decision fatigue. Workflows automate repetitive tasks. Scheduled breaks restore focus before burnout arrives. Systems and structure are your allies. Designed for energy, not inspiration. Most people try to push through fatigue with sheer willpower. They force themselves to act when the body and mind are depleted. It works temporarily, but collapse is inevitable. Progress becomes erratic. Motivation is a placebo. Energy preservation is permanent. Look at elite athletes. They don't train until exhausted. They sleep strategically. They hydrate. They fuel. They reduce avoidable stress. Their system prioritizes sustainable energy. That's why results last. Designed for energy, not inspiration. The same principle applies to work, study, and personal development. Eliminate unnecessary steps. Remove friction. Simplify decisions. Protect attention. Guard focus. Optimize recovery. These are all energy-saving moves that make execution inevitable. Designed for energy, not inspiration. Notice how often people rely on inspiration instead of preparation. They wait for the right feeling. They ignore systems that conserve energy. They burn out quickly. They fail because the structure was weak. Energy is the real currency. Mood is a distraction. You have a choice. You can chase emotions, hoping they will fuel action. Or you can protect your energy, ensuring action happens no matter how you feel. That's the shift. Energy is predictable. Feelings are not. You can control energy through routine, environment, and boundaries. You cannot control mood. Trying to do so is wasted effort. Designed for energy, not inspiration. Every small adjustment compounds. A structured sleep schedule. A clear workspace. A simple routine. Every reduction in friction preserves energy for what matters most. It's not glamorous. It's boring. But boring executed daily beats exciting done rarely. You don't need to feel inspired to act. You need energy to execute. Designed for energy, not inspiration. This principle protects consistency. When you're tired, the system works. When distractions appear, the system works. When motivation disappears, the system works. Energy management makes all other lessons, systems, habits, tracking, function at full capacity. Designed for energy, not inspiration. Most people ignore this lesson. They try harder instead of smarter. They force effort instead of removing friction. They push through instead of planning for sustainability. That's why progress is sporadic. Energy is not optional. It is foundational. You have a choice. You can waste energy chasing mood. where you can conserve it, direct it, and harness it for consistent action. Designed for energy, not inspiration. You've learned how to act regardless of mood. You've learned how to make habits automatic and boring. You've learned how to track action instead of feelings. Now, energy management ensures you have the fuel to sustain all of it. And when energy is protected, consistency becomes inevitable. But even with energy, habits, and systems, most people still fail because they do not internalize identity. They act, but they do not become the person who always shows up. It's time to fix that. Chapter 9. Become the person who always shows up. Most people think discipline is about motivation. Most people think consistency is about trying harder. They are wrong. Discipline is identity. Consistency is identity. You have a choice. You can chase temporary feelings, or you can become the person who simply shows up every single day. That's the key. Identity does not follow thought. It follows repeated action. You don't feel disciplined. You act disciplined. You don't feel productive. You act productive. You don't feel consistent. You act consistent. Every action is a deposit into your self-trust account. Every skipped action is a withdrawal. And the balance of those deposits determines how you see yourself. You don't feel consistent. You act consistent. Look at professionals, athletes, and high performers. They don't affirm their way to success. They do it. They show up. Day after day. Repetition is how confidence is built. Repetition is how trust in yourself is built. Repetition is how identity is built. You have a choice. You can hope to feel like the person you want to be, or you can act like them until your mind catches up. That's the shift. Every time you follow through without emotion, without hype, without validation, you reinforce the truth. I am someone who completes what they start. That identity compounds over time. It becomes automatic. It becomes undeniable. You don't feel consistent. You act consistent. Most people fail because they look for evidence inside themselves. They wait for confidence to arrive. They wait for trust to feel earned. And while they wait, days slip away. Weeks slip away. Momentum disappears. Trust yourself through action, not reflection. Consistency is not a practice. It is a declaration made every day in behavior. The act itself is the proof, not a motivational quote, not a journal entry, not a pep talk. You don't feel consistent. You act consistent. This also changes how you handle mistakes. Identity built on action is forgiving. Skip days don't break you completely. They are corrected by the next action. Momentum continues. Confidence rebounds. Self-trust repairs itself. The person who always shows up doesn't quit because of temporary setbacks. They continue. They persist. They execute. You have a choice. You can define yourself by feeling or by action. The first is unstable. The second is unstoppable. Consistency reshapes confidence. Repetition builds courage. Action replaces fear. You don't feel ready. You act ready. You don't feel confident. You act confident. You don't feel capable. You act capable. You don't feel consistent. You act consistent. Identity becomes visible in behavior. Others notice it. The world responds to it. And internally, self-trust grows stronger with every unbroken chain of action. You have a choice. You can depend on external validation, or you can define yourself through repeated action. Discipline becomes a habit of identity, not effort. Consistency becomes a reflection of who you are, not how you feel. And when you live this way, results follow naturally. Success is no longer a hope. It is the byproduct of identity-driven action. You don't feel consistent. You act consistent. Most people still resist this truth because they overcomplicate the process. They chase inspiration. They look for shortcuts. They confuse occasional action with identity. That is why they fail. Identity is built quietly, unremarkably, and repeatedly. You don't need to announce it. You don't need to justify it. You simply show up. That's the secret. And when this becomes internalized, something extraordinary happens. The system you built, the routines, the minimum non-negotiable actions, the energy management, the tracking, all of it becomes effortless. The person you are carries the system. The system does not carry you. You don't feel consistent. You act consistent. And this leads to the final level of discipline, achieving results quietly. Not for recognition, not for applause, not for validation, but because consistent action naturally produces outcomes that speak louder than words. You've built identity through action. Next, you'll learn how to win quietly and let results speak for themselves. Chapter 10. Win quietly and let results speak. Most people chase recognition. They post their wins. They announce their progress. They seek applause before the work is done. And in doing so, they weaken discipline. External validation is a crutch. It trains the mind to rely on others to confirm effort. It creates dependency. It invites distraction. It makes consistency fragile. No announcement, just results. You have a choice. You can seek approval and validation, or you can execute silently, letting the work compound in private. That's the key. High performers don't tell anyone when they start. They don't brag about the grind. They don't wait for recognition. They do the work quietly. They show up. They follow the systems. They act consistent. And over time, results speak louder than any announcement ever could. No announcement, just results. Think about it. The athlete who trains off-season without cameras. The entrepreneur building quietly before the launch. The student practicing alone long before anyone notices. These people understand a fundamental truth. Consistent action compounded over time creates undeniable outcomes. External applause is optional. Execution is mandatory. No announcement, just results. Most people fail because they confuse visibility with achievement. They broadcast effort instead of completing it. They announce progress instead of enforcing consistency. And when the initial excitement fades, the system collapses. Silence strengthens discipline. Quiet execution builds identity. Private wins reinforce self-trust. No announcement, just results. You have a choice. You can perform for attention, or you can perform for mastery. Mastery does not need an audience. It does not need recognition. It does not wait for approval. Mastery is reinforced daily through private proof. Systems maintained, actions completed, energy protected, habits repeated, identity strengthened. No announcement, just results. This is where the journey of discipline comes full circle. You've learned. Motivation is a trap. Structure endures. Decide once, not every day. Build systems that move without you. Lower the bar so you never quit. Separate feelings from actions. Make consistency boring and automatic. Track what you do, not how you feel. Protect your energy, not your mood. Become the person who always shows up. And now, the final lesson. Execution in silence compounds powerfully. Results eventually reveal the effort. Recognition follows, but it is irrelevant. You don't act for applause. You act because you already decided. No announcement, just results. So start today. Show up. Execute your system. Protect your energy. Track your actions. Repeat. Quietly. Relentlessly. Boringly. And watch the momentum build. Because discipline does not need attention. It needs action. No announcement. Just results. If you found value in this audiobook, make sure to subscribe for more transformative content. Every episode is designed to sharpen your mind, strengthen your systems, and guide you toward mastery. Quietly, consistently, and effectively. Now go. Execute, build, and let the results speak. No announcement, just results.